Good morning, everyone. We'd like to call the meeting to order. This is a governing board workshop for January 12th. And if you'll rise with me and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. All right, we do have a quorum. We are missing one Director Stenebond, who is ill with an excused absence. So we will move right into business, the approval of the December 8th minutes. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? All right, they will stand as written. Moving right into new business, the National Lawn Bowling Tournament presentation.
I know, I was like, wow, that was fast. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Everyone. I appreciate this time to be on this workshop, and Tracy for helping me get on the docket, as well as Mr. Hurley. Thank you so much. So my name is Veronica Sum. I am the president of Bowls USA. I am, let me move to the next slide, sorry. Who is Bowls USA? We are the national organization for the sport of lawn bowls in the United States. We are a nonprofit organization, and we are volunteers at all governance levels. So no one has any paid positions. We are all volunteers for this organization. How the Bowls USA is split up is we have 7 geographic regions from coast to coast. So you'll see all the shaded areas of those 7 different regions. We have about approximately 3,000 members nationwide. And we roll up to the larger organization of World Bowls, which is a recognized international federation for the sport of bowls. They have about 57 member nations, and on the second map below, you'll see all the dots of where those nations are, and they have about 500,000 members. Moving on, just to talk about the sport of bowls, just some history. I'm not going to read through all this, but it is very interesting that bowls is considered probably the oldest sport in the world, is kind of invented by the Egyptians about 5,000 years ago. It came to the United States in about the 1600s, and it came actually to New York, and which was named originally New Amsterdam, and the British colonists began playing at actually Bowling Green Park in New York City. So if you notice within the United States, there's a lot of cities called Bowling Green, and it's because they had originally bowling greens. So if you ever noticed about that, it's a little bit of a fun history fact. Moving on, about Bowls USA, I'm not going to read through all this, but just the vision I think is very important because we just redid it. Our vision is for lawn bowls to become the most diverse, inclusive, and accessible sport in the United States, where everyone is welcome to participate and succeed regardless of their background, abilities, or identity. Our goals are basically to promote the sport within the United States and grow and retain membership. So those are our 2 primary goals for this sport. Moving on, the 2 U.S. events that Bowls USA sponsors are the U.S. Open. So I would say the U.S. Open for lawn bowling is probably as big as the U.S. Open in tennis, as well as the U.S. Open of golf. So that's our primary event, and all eyes are always focused on that event. It is held annually at any club or venues that can host between 150 to 300 participants. And it's open to local, national, and international players. So we do have a lot of countries that do come to the U.S. Open to play, because that is where like the most competitive participants are there. And it is North America's only international open event. So anyone that can is registered with a club or a division can participate. The only thing I want to highlight is our second event, which is the National Championships. This is all the top players, whether it's singles or pairs for female and male, come together and they compete at the top level against all 7 divisions. And what happened last year was great because this woman you'll see in the corner, Ann Nunes, who's one of our top female players, she actually went to Australia to represent the United States, and she won for the first time in the U.S. history the World Champion of Champions. So we are very proud of her because that's a feat, because Australia, just to FYI, Australia, New Zealand, England, those are always the top countries with the top players, and she played against those people and she actually won it. So we're very proud to have her as our World Champion of Champions. The demographics for the information for the past US Open, just to highlight, we've had our last 5 US Opens minus the COVID years. And if you notice in Arizona in 2018, 2019, when we hosted it here, it had the largest numbers, which is just a sign that your greens are the best here in the United States. So you'll see we have the US Open this past year in 2023, and we only had 195 participants. And that could have been because of post-COVID, but just definitely, if you see the numbers for 2018 and 2019, there were 300 plus. So it's a great sign. So the US Open, and we're gonna try to have this US Open in all 3 Sun Cities. So it would be in Sun Cities, the Sun City West and Sun City Grand. Why are we choosing Sun City? It's because we have, like I mentioned, best greens in the United States. The close proximity of all 3 of those places are just so much easier to travel than in South California, where we just had our last US Open. It took about 30 to 45 minutes to travel to different greens. So just the proximity really helps. Definitely the ability to host these large numbers that we're looking at to host the US Open is a primary positive factor of having it here. And then the great hospitality. We really appreciate everything that all the clubs do for us, and it's just always, everyone's very, very welcoming here. And then lastly, the predictable climate. So we usually have the US Open here in November if we have it in Sun City, and the weather is just so perfect for all of us. So, and it's usually very consistent. So it's very nice to have that. Advantages to host. So basically positive exposure. So I know a lot of Canadians own homes here. So I know that if there are international folks here that would come, they would definitely either do Airbnbs. They might even think of possibly buying something here, especially if we have a continuous effort to have the US Open at Sun Cities. We can attract more sponsors, so we're trying to hit like sponsors like Nike and Adidas and all that stuff. So definitely, if we have it here, it's definitely something that we could attract more sponsors. And lastly, just the 2, growth of the sport and the growth of membership. Like I mentioned, that's one of our goals, is to definitely focus on those 2 items. I just wanted to highlight the small impact on Sun City West. So right now, we did a survey recently, back in December, with the members of the Johnson Lawn Bowling Club, and it was very positive. Let me just pull this up real quick, sorry. We sent out about 170 emails, and our response was about 77% that was positive to actually host the US Open here. Again, we want to make sure we check with the membership and that we are, they're willing to have something such as this big event within Sun City West. We would also try not to affect the social bowlers because we know that not everyone is a competitive bowler. So we would think of dedicating 1 green for them so that wouldn't impact them in regards to playing social bowling. And then lastly, parking. I know parking probably might be an issue, but we do have a lot of international people that actually stay together in homes, and they usually carpool. So hopefully that will have less impact on the parking as well. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the responsibility matrix for the US Open. So if you see on these couple arrows, the 2 green arrows is what I would like to focus on. For the different recreation centers, the 2 things we probably most likely need from you is the green maintenance and liability insurance. That's the only kind of things that we would need your support. And then on the other side of the clubs, we just probably need the support of the clubs, like to open the clubhouse, to show us where the equipment is held, and the coordination and organization of some volunteers. So, and the majority, if you see in the blue, is what Bowls USA would be responsible for. Moving on. So reasons for hosting the U.S. Open. The more attention we have on the sport, such as this U.S. Open in the United States, the more likely we can actually be considered for Olympic inclusion. So in 2032, in Brisbane, as I mentioned, in Australia, it is one of the top sports in Australia. They are considering, they are hosting the 2032 Olympics, and World Bowls is very focused on including our sport both in the Olympics and the Paralympics, which is, again, very, very visible. So in 2024, we would like to host the U.S. Open here in November. I am meeting with the Sun Cities as well as eventually Sun City Grand. They only have one green, so not as much of an impact as these other Sun Cities. And, you know, we're hoping to attract other countries and future retirees here to kind of consider buying here as well. And, you know, sponsors, as I mentioned before, like pharmaceutical companies, consumer goods. Like one of the sponsors I'm trying to hit, it's like suntan lotion companies, because that's, you know, you're always outside in the sun, so you want to protect yourself. So we're trying to look for those kind of sponsors. And then it should generate hospitality and tourism revenue as well. So it's very important. So that's all I had. So thank you very much for your time and for listening to my presentation. And then if you guys have any questions, you know, please feel free to ask me now or reach out to me.
Do we have any questions for Victoria? General Manager?
Thank you. Thank you very much,
Oh, no
and for your
problem.
kind comments about our courts. I know Mr. Patty sitting in the back is very proud of that. But
They're awesome.
You could say thank you.
Yo, thank you.
You can say that again if you like. Just a quick question. When it comes to the U.S. Open and or Olympics, are there any restrictions on synthetic turf? Does it have to be natural grass you're playing on?
No. So right now, the faster, so I don't know if you know green speed. So right now, anything, okay. So anything it's a weird thing. It's anything the higher number is a faster green instead of what you would think a lower number would be a faster green. So anything in Australia, they play on synthetic carpet and grass, but mostly synthetic, and they run about 16 to 20 seconds, which is very fast. Right now, Johnson is running 13, 14. Which is still fast, don't get me wrong, but it's just Australia has that because they have so many greens in Australia.
I was just curious as to restrictions.
Restrictions meaning, sorry.
Natural grass only
Oh, no.
as far as competition goes?
No,
Okay.
sorry.
I do have a question. This is for the General Manager, but she talked about liability insurance. Would that need to be something beyond our normal liability insurance?
I think we could look into that. I'm not certain. I mean, we do have coverage for all of our clubs and activities, and if this is a club-sponsored event, I think we'd be all probably okay.
Okay, yeah, we've had it here in the past, so it shouldn't be an issue, but I wanted to bring that up as one of the things that we asked for support from.
Okay, great. Alan, you have a question?
Thank you, Chairman Hurley. Thank you very much for being here this morning and for sharing this with us, and it's a very intriguing proposition. I want to go a little outside of the scope. I'm curious about, you had a little bit of demographics about lawn bowling. Can you tell me a little bit about where the sport is heading in terms of new players? Where are they coming from? What is the appeal range of the sport in terms of age demographics?
So we're definitely trying to, definitely this sport has always been towards more of an older population. We are trying to get younger generations to start, but I guess, people that think of it as an old people sport, and we're trying to get away from that. So we actually have this young man from California, from San Diego. He's 21 or 22. He has now gone over to 2 international events, and he's trying to inspire people from his college and things of that nature to start, you know, getting involved in the sport. Another way of also promoting the sport, there's a thing called short mat. Short mat is similar to lawn bowling. It's just a carpet that you can roll out, and you can put it in gymnasiums and other places as long as you can store it, right? And you would roll it out. You still use the same bowl. It's just a shorter mat, and basically it's the same concept of the game. But I think that's the way of our future of progressing the sport forward, by bringing that kind, because the green, you can't bring the green anywhere, right? And you have to have cities and towns to build these greens. And so we figured to be more nimble, we would have to do more short mat to kind of get people interested. And then just an FYI, I have someone from Oregon, and Pam, my secretary from Bowls USA, is here. We have another person from Oregon that I met from social bowling, and he mentioned to me, oh, I'm moving down here and because I love the sport and I will move anywhere that has a green. And he knows that this is the best place for the green. I mean, for him to buy something here because of the green, that's amazing.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. If I wanted to learn more about the sport's demographics and its profile, your website, would that be a good place to start, or where would I go?
We can get you that information.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
No vellum.
Christine?
It's early. It's okay. My coffee hasn't kicked in yet.
My memory only goes to Lisa.
It's a mental block for you, Chairman Hurley. That's okay. Veronica, and I don't know much about the size of the typical audience, if you will, folks that would come in. Do you have I'm thinking in terms of the needs for any additional security or coordination with our local sheriff's department and so forth. So in terms of the size of attendees, or what could we typically expect in terms of additional visitor traffic? Any thoughts? I know it's a tough one.
Oh yeah, we're definitely not a rowdy bunch, as Pam said. I can get back to you on that. I'm not 100%. I can't say
No
right now,
problem.
but I'll definitely get back to you on that, Christine.
No problem. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No, thank you.
Sorry, do you have any more questions? Okay, let's order. Okay, we don't vote at this meeting, but
Okay, yeah.
I'm going to ask for consensus to move this to the general meeting, and at that point, we'll vote on referring it to the general manager to work out the details. Okay, we have consensus? Okay. Karen, we're going to move this to the general meeting. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Victoria.
it.
All right, great presentation. All right, moving right along, 3.02, the fiscal year 24-25 capital budget. Facilities operations capital project manager.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Carl.
I didn't create it, I just got asked to do it, so. Good morning. This is the January review of proposed capital improvement projects for the fiscal year 24-25. You'll see that we've kind of started over in our primary presentation, our starting presentation piece, which is the same format that we've consistently been using over the last 3 months. So you will see that we've just simplified it down to the new conversations of January, since this is the list that was handed to the general manager. Everything is consistent what you've seen since the last November's presentation. And the only thing in these categories of new repair and replacement, golf's repair and replacement, and allowances is that we added the new item facilities guard shaft from our last conversations in the new category for Palm Ridge pickleball facility. And that addition is for $25,000. Otherwise, and why do I mention that especially? Because the rest of the presentations moving forward are discussions 50,000 and greater until we get to March, where we start discussing 100,000 and greater only. So kind of narrowing things down where we're in our comfort level that we're moving forward in the capital budget process. So,
Carl, let me interrupt just a minute. At the March meeting, we will go through all of the projects, $100,000 and above. Okay. Usually what we do is we look at them en masse and then pull out particular projects that we want to discuss individually. So be aware that as you're listening to Carl, we'll have that in mind. Thank you.
thank you for mentioning that, Mr. Hurley. All right, moving on to the presentation portion of this portion of the capital project planning process is a little more detailed, as I discussed in the past months, that we get to this point. We start talking 50,000 greater and then 100,000 greater. So our first line 'em up for bid is Sports Pavilion Lizard Acres bar room renovation and equipment, 225,000. You have this for your reading pleasure, but there's a lot more detail if you have questions for me over the next few months. New 40 linear foot of bar and top, 2 walk-up point of sales, static seating being planned for 160 to 180 persons per our occupancy details, and those will be narrowed down a little bit more through the architectural process that has begun. Maintains the 5 bowling displays, maintains 3 dartboards, has new coolers and sanitizing equipment. It relocates the existing 3-compartment sink and reuses the 4-tap beer cooler system. We'll be adding a new 2-tap craft beer cooler system. It involves modifying some of the controls and lighting for the Lizard Acres Pub area. And it definitely modifies some plumbing, electrical, and HVAC per the recommendations from the architectural engineers. And bar framing and decor plans are included in the cost. So we are working off the plan picture that you are seeing. This is where we sit and expect to end up and land if this project is approved by the governing board. Moving on to the library expansion renovation design. Simply, this is 100,000 of approved funds for some form of denomination of architectural design and engineering discussions if we're moving forward. If we wanted to move forward with this project in the future year planning. And it is interior and exterior renovations and additions, design architectural engineering fees, provides architectural plans to myself, and the engineering and structural documents needed to start working with vendors to assume cost estimates. It produces a 60% planning scenario for documents that qualifies me for having discussions with Maricopa County. The project planning process falls within our 2-year project planning process timeline. So next year again is just this assumed cost for some form of documents, engineering, and then the next year's discussion that I would present in September is the best known financials for moving forward down the road. And this gives me the ability to solicit those costs for future fiscal year budgeting. R.H. Johnson tractor with backhoe, 75,000. This is facilities maintenance equipment. It's rapid response availability, eliminates costly rentals, eliminates time travel if available by a rental company, and reduces the need for some contractor use. Beardsley Park iron fence and gates simply is an iron fence enclosure similar to the fence and gate system that exists around horseshoes. Has the appropriate amount of gates for member use and entry to events and the park access. It also has vehicle gates for maintenance, both by Todd's department and facilities maintenance. Eliminates an unsightly seasonal temporary fence replacement and install each time we have to take that green fence up and down. It will reduce on labor and fatigue for that same install. And it creates those controlled access points that I mentioned for events and other yearly activities. Moving on to the Kuntz Tennis Facility renovation. This is a similar request for dollars for costing for like the library. Interior facility renovations and post-tension court design, lighting, and fencing. Design concept is based on today's discussion of 2 tennis courts, 9 to 12 pickleball courts, and 1 multi-purpose court. And again, provides me all the documents to be able to go get, solicit future year costs if this project was going to be considered. That is all of the new capital items in our list, with the exception that I did not have time in how we present our documents for that guard shack. So simply, the guard shack was $25,000 with a little lesser cost for the guard shack, but there's the idea of a pad, electrical infrastructure done in-house, and then the discussions from the operating budget for staffing that facility. Kuntz outfield fence replacement kicks off our reserve study line items, coming directly out of the reserve study tool. $495,000 replaces 520 linear feet of 24-foot tall fence, replacing existing crash pads, new fence and posts to support the 30-foot tall fence in lieu of 24-foot. Fence posts currently broken in 2 locations from previous walking tours with properties and others. Those have been repaired, on a solid temporary basis, but, we all saw the evidence of the aging fence. Cost impacts related to this price are due to the increased diameter of posts and digging, the proximity to the easement wall and logistics, the increase in fence height, and the warning track removal temporarily for the reinstall of a new fence. And that has to be done by the original vendor, General Acrylics, due to they are the ones holding the warranty on our AstroTurf. Silvercraft remodel, millwork and countertops, $375,000. This is an interior renovation of all club millwork and countertops. It involves custom heavy-duty countertops in some areas. Difficulty that I'm experiencing procuring reface millwork vendor versus replacing it with new. If I find the reface millwork vendor, in fact, I'm meeting one today to walk the project, we might find some efficiencies in this cost down the road that would eventually just turn out into savings if this project were approved. Office area demo and reframing is part of the project. And then the project, just to mention, there's 2 line items that I've mentioned over the last 3 months that are in addition that come from the reserve study tool. LVT flooring replacement in that room for $23,850, and the grid ceiling and sprinkler head replacement for approximately $38,000. Moving along to the Palm Ridge outdoor pool deck surface replacement. This simply is replacing the 12,900 square foot of exterior pool deck, pre-grinding, preparation, getting rid of the old surface that is currently there, and then replacing it with the new rubber decking that we have at both Kuntz and R.H. Johnson. Palm Ridge Activities Aquatics Building rooftop restorations. I'll kind of breeze through these as they come along, but we have multiple roof restorations proposed for next year. This is part of our roofing program. The restorations come from a pre-evaluation of our roofs. Can they get a restoration, or do the roofs actually need to be fully replaced? The data has come back that I can propose all these roofs to be restored. What that does for us is that it includes the 10-year extended warranty by the vendor that provides the new restoration. And the photo here clearly shows what a restoration does for us. So as 10 years goes by, these roofs get stained, damaged from the sun, weather and elements, and when all of our roofs look like this, they can easily go into another 10-year cycle. And the hopes is that when you do these restorations, you're just going another 10 years and you're going another 10 years. So it's a very efficient process of making sure that we don't get to that place one day where we will have to, for some folks or corporations that don't do roof restoration, they have, hundreds and hundreds of thousands, 5 to 6 times the amount of this to actually take the roof down to its original structure and redo it. So that's what we always hope to avoid, and it's really a positive outcome. It looks beautiful when it's done. The Palm Ridge Fitness Center cardio equipment, $159,000. Cardio equipment replacements are scheduled every 5 years per rec center. This particularly involves approximately 26 pieces of treadmills, cross trainers, recumbent bikes, upright bikes, rowers versus striders, and side-fit equipment. R.H. Johnson admin flat roof, again, another extension of our 10-year warranty by doing this process. Recreational Environmental Services Department has landscaping vehicles. I put this slide together. The actual replacing average age is 13 years for the old vehicles, so it's better than the information that I had. and $110,892 for 5 heavy-duty workhorse workman vehicles. Moving on to Palm Ridge indoor pool deck resurface. This is the same as the exterior, a little easier project, definitely reflected in the cost, a little smaller square footage too. But this would also be replaced, or prepped and replaced with a rubber decking. I have a carryover project from 2 years ago, based from the COVID timeframe. It was hard to get tile. So we have a standing project to redo all the wainscoting tile within that indoor pool, and these two things would happen at the same time. So Palm Ridge indoor pool deck surface replacement for $71,648. Palm Ridge, on top of cardio equipment, we also have the strength equipment. We were notified in the last couple of months that the manufacturer of the existing strength equipment is no longer supporting any parts or service to these items. We are experiencing a need for some of the welded components to be, fixed in the interim. This equipment has had a 25-year useful life, and it's just time for replacement. So $63,954 for Palm Ridge to have the strength equipment and cardio equipment done in the same year. R.H. Johnson admin copier machines, replacing 3 copier machines for $62,400. R.H. Johnson small fitness addition, small maintenance pool storage areas, flat roof restoration, another 10-year extension roof program project. R.H. Johnson's facilities maintenance has a truck due, replaces M8, the 2010 Chevy 2500 for $54,573. Russ's team has approximately 14 units across the rec centers. I listed things even less than 50,000, just so you're aware of the complement of AC in our seasonal exchange next year. So HVAC replacement between Kuntz is 5 units, the R.H. Johnson Library 5 units, R.H. Johnson Campus 3 units, and Kuntz has another additional on an outbuilding. A little bit out of sequence is our allowances, only because Todd is going to take over in a moment here and discuss the golf reserve study items, but nothing has changed in the allowances. We have proposed $420,000. Just as a reminder, these are for unexpected things that happen, such as well pump replacements, safety and structural items, equipment, information technology changes and needs, energy conservation opportunities, ADA compliance upgrades, or new requests. And probably one of the more important ones is the unexpected facility improvements. Just to elaborate on that, throughout the year, because we are always meeting out of budget cycle, you have an approved budget, but yet we have meetings that discuss things that bring up new topics, and sometimes work has to be decided to be done out of budget cycle. This line item particularly gives us an opportunity to make those things happen. A good example would be like, we had a space utilization request for Zymergy. Instead of an actual room expansion, we were able to have a small purchase out of allowances for a new shed, and that solved the idea of having an actual expensive room expansion. So those are moments that capture the allowances. Well pumps going down. So that concludes my portion, and I'll be happy to come back for any questions, but Todd, you up?
Would you like to take some questions now before Todd starts?
That's fine with me.
Lisa?
Thank you, President Hurley. So real quick, Carl, can you just remind us for the Beardsley Park, the iron fence, the cost to continually put up and tear down the fencing for the concerts and everything that goes on over there? Just can you estimate what it costs for that temporary fencing?
I mean, quite honestly, the green fencing is a few $100s per roll. Not significant, but it's unsightly.
Right.
But it does involve, approximately 4 mobilizations of our team, 4 people driving stakes in the ground every season. You know, our staff is not young. It doesn't always last as long, and then we're doing fencing again. So the cost of what we're replacing is not massive. It's more about, you know, saving the backs of our folks, you know, injuries, and we'll have a nice, beautiful permanent fence for the same purpose.
No, I totally agree, because I attend a lot of those events, and people are always tearing down that fencing during the events, and so this is definitely going to be a much better usage for that iron fencing than.
Good question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Dick?
Carl, I want to thank you for an excellent presentation. This is very clear, and it makes everything very clear for us. So one of the things, this is not a question, this is really just a restatement, okay? That when you look at slide number 2, which is the $100,000 for the library expansion, just as a matter of information, this doesn't mean that this project is approved. So I want everyone to hear that, because I hear from the community that, oh, we're spending $4 million on all that. That's not true. We are simply looking at the specifications and what it would cost should we decide to proceed with this, and whatever that decision-making process is.
And then to add to that, this also doesn't mean that we're spending $100,000 in architectural and engineering. It gives us the opportunity to make best decisions for whatever steps are needed in architectural and engineering. And at some point, if there's a roadblock or an impasse based on our committee discussions and whatnot, that's the point where we stop and also stop spending. So, you know, do the work, hopefully get good results, but this $100,000 is a placeholder for the opportunity to get the information to keep going. And that's the same for the pickleball conversation at tennis renovation at Coots.
Director Novello?
Thank you, Chairman Hurley. Also, could be less of a question, Carl, maybe more of a statement. We first started talking about, well, not first, but we had a conversation at our governing board meeting on November the 3rd about the master plan priorities, right? And this is, you know, and now we're at the point where we will be discussing some very important key concepts. We really do need to prioritize those. We may need to make some tough decisions for next year based on some other factors like the minimum wage conversation that we need to have and so forth. I'd like to know when the governing board will be considering those. And again, just to repeat, I had the 6 key concepts that operations gave to us. Golf and water, number 1. Number 2, casual dining. Number 3, technology. Number 4, the library. Number 5, pickleball. And number 6, what will we do with the Kuntz facility? Right? So those are the 6 in no particular order, and we took on ourselves the need to prioritize those together with ops. When will we do that?
Next Wednesday, the general manager is going to give a mid-year review of what's going on, and he'll have 7 topics that he'll talk about that will form the basis of what we'll prioritize.
Excellent.
And we'll do it at the next workshop, which is February 9th.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
I do want to make a clarification on what Carl has presented, and that is, I should have done it before because it relates to the color of the slides. He's got new projects on kind of like an orange slide, and he's got the R&R projects on more of a blue slide.
Blue and green.
There is a big difference in those because the new ones are the ones that we can look at and say, do we need it? Is it a priority? Do we go with it? The other ones that come off the reserve study, the reserve study basically plots out how long things last and when they need to be replaced. So some of those, it's not that we have to do them, but they're more of an immediate need rather than a want. Okay? I just want to make that clear to everybody. Yes. Director Williams.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to just point out that the guard shack, that he called it, is a recommendation from the Properties Committee, but we prefer it to call it a monitor office. It is sorely needed. For those of you who are not over at Palm Ridge often, the monitor station located out by the pickleball courts is this time of year, people wearing 8 layers of clothes to sit there and check in people for that activity. And in the summertime, it is beastly with no air conditioning. So it is such a critical area. We want to make sure that the users of all of our facilities are owner members. And we do have issues with outsiders using those courts. And I think it's probably money, some of the best well-spent money we would have to take care of an ongoing problem.
Okay, thank you.
Also, Carl, just, I love your pictures, but, and we, being one who works out at Palm Ridge, I had to chuckle because the picture on the Palm Ridge is at Beardsley. Another one is not at Palm Ridge either. It's at RHJ, but Palm Ridge will take all the credit. We're just glad you know we need help and we need new equipment. Thank you.
My camera ran out of film, so I used old photos.
Okay. Director Vines.
Thank you, President Hurley. Carl, thank you. So one last question regarding, kind of piggybacking onto what Kay was saying. When the new equipment arrives, what do we do with the old equipment? Are we transferring it or?
Well, it's a great question. In fact, staff has been overwhelmed with questions from the community this season, which we didn't experience in the past. Can I buy the equipment? So our members wanted to know, can they buy the equipment? The fact is that that is not our program. We have never done that in the past. The other discussions that Russ and I had very strongly about this were, you buy a piece of equipment if that was an opportunity from us, and 1 week later that piece of equipment breaks down. It doesn't have the support that we have as staff here with our maintenance team and program. You know, we have nothing to guarantee or warranty to a customer. The resale of that equipment is minimal. It's not glorious. It doesn't create us thousands of dollars in offset in cost, but it does, a vendor comes in, the program by the actual vendor selling us the new equipment. So they give us a rebate cost on it, and it offsets the actual cost for our overall repurchase. So, and then the truth of that is that subcontractor probably goes and sells it elsewhere. So.
Great, thanks, Carl.
You're welcome.
Director Novello.
One more, and thank you so much. Similarly, when we talk about our allowances, just, and this is more for the rest of our owner members who are here today and maybe watching online. We've talked about allowances. It's a very important part of our budget. To characterize all of that as emergency is really not completely accurate within budget and finance, and our CFO will be working. We might restructure that amount of money so that it's more clear and transparent. There's a component of that that is probably more discretionary spend, which is all built into our bylaws and policies, right? So that operations can do things like make time-efficient, quick replacements of things like ADA handrails and so forth. It may not be a quote-unquote emergency, but it's still something that makes sense. And our general manager and the staff will do that, and they should. Maybe calling that out so there's less of an implication that we're not transparent is something that Budget and Finance is going to be working together with Cliff on. Just
They
is my
are going
understanding.
to look at it?
I believe that's what we've been talking about as an agenda item together with Cliff.
Okay, yeah, good.
And of course, we will all, every committee and the governing board will come up with that. So we may call out a line item within allowances so that it's a little more clear. We'll talk together about what's the right way forward.
Okay, very good.
And, you know, just for transparency too, but since I've been here 6.5 years, every year this has been pretty clearly explained that it is not an emergency tool. It does have categories, and those categories have been broken down. You know, it's not always emergencies. Unexpected is.
No, and anything over $50,000 still has to come back to the board.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Carl.
Todd?
Thank you, Carl. Good morning.
Good morning.
Just have a few items on the capital budget that we have for golf maintenance coming up. The first one is the Echo Mesa Irrigation and Turf Reduction Project, which is scheduled to start April 7th of 2025. So we're more than a year away from breaking ground on this project. And so phase one, the planning, which we're currently under right now, we budgeted $205,000 for this. Irrigation design plan, turf reduction design, those have been completed. The pump station design, we're looking at having that completed by the 15th of this month. GPS mapping has been completed. Engineer drawing completion date is set for the end of the month. Submit design plans for the bidding process. We're looking at the second week of January of this year. And then the turf removal, street fronts, and road crossing at Echo Mesa and Pebblebrook, the completion date for that is the 31st. And that's with the grant money that we received from the Office of Tourism. So that's underway right now, and so we'll have that all finished up. And then phase two, the main project, turf reduction and irrigation replacement, we're looking at a cost of $50,000 per acre. Now, over at Grandview last year, we were at $43,000 per acre, so we have a $7,000 increase. A lot of that has to do to an increase in irrigation material, 12 to 15% increase on that. Desert landscape installation, we're looking at about 18 acres are scheduled for removal, and a 14-foot perimeter on average. Now, over at Grandview, we're close to 25 feet on that. So, and then street fronts and road crossings will be part of that. And this is similar to, or almost identical to, the Grandview project. It's just scaled back quite a bit. As you know, we removed 45 acres over at Grandview, so we're only looking at 18 acres at the Echo Mesa project. And estimated water savings of about 65 acre feet per year. We had 150 acre feet of savings, water savings, or projected water savings with the Grandview project. Trees and plants, we're looking at 2,200 plants at Echo Mesa. Over at Grandview, we had over 6,700 plants. So again, scaled back quite a bit, 60 trees. And again, these are going to be on road crossings and street fronts, just like what we did over at Grandview. We're not going to be putting in new trees behind homeowners at this project, but again, all those trees will be on the street fronts and road crossings. New water distribution station or pump station for $280,000 will be also included in phase two. At Grandview, we did it kind of flip-flopped that. We put that in phase one. And so, you know, we learned a lot of things with the Grandview project. So we're just carrying that on to the Echo Mesa project. So just little things that we could have done better and improve the project a little bit. And installation of mainline crossing, road line main lines over there. And again, we did that in the phase one over at Grandview, but we learned that maybe it's best that we do that in the phase two on this project. And then a project timeline that I put together. We were going to keep 9 holes open like what we did over at Grandview, but we decided just to close the whole golf course. The reason for doing that was because of the golf lab, the restaurant, the merchandising, and then the ladies and men's putters would have a home to go to for a little bit. But we decided with the Echo Mesa project, we just closed the whole golf course. So we're going to start on the back 9 where the pump station is located, and everything, that's kind of the starting point, and everything comes out from there as far as the main line goes. So irrigation turf, our long-range plan for turf reduction, as you can see, I mentioned Grandview was at 45 acres, and Echo Mesa at 15. That's a little bit off. We've made some changes on that. But then we go over to Stardust in the year 2027. We're looking at 6 to 10 acres for annual water savings of 33 acre feet. Pebblebrook will round off in 2029 and a 62 acre feet water savings. So all in all, it's going to be about 300 acre feet of water savings annually. So that's almost enough water to put on a golf course, like similar to Trail Ridge. So that's a lot. That's a good savings. So that's all going to keep us in or put us in compliance with ADWR with their management plans, especially the 5th management plan that rolls out in 2025. And then golf course maintenance, some of the closures and projects that we have, 5-year plan. As you know, Pebblebrook and Stardust will be closed this coming summer. We're going to do some tree removal and replacement. And then once we get into 25, Trail Ridge, if I highlighted here, these are all water conservation projects. So you can see that we're going to do a hardscape around the lake over on Trail Ridge on number 3. Echo Mesa is the main project, the irrigation. And then 26, Deer Valley, again, water conservation shoreline hardscape on hole number 18, Desert Trails hardscape on 14. And then we do phase 1 at Stardust in 26, getting ready for 27 where they're closed. Grandview will be closed again in 27. We haven't identified any projects that we're going to be doing over there, but that, we'll put that together. And then in 2028, Trail Ridge, hardscape on 12, Echo Mesa will be closed at that time. We have a few things we'd like to do over there. And then Pebblebrook irrigation, again, phase 1, similar to where we're at right now with Echo Mesa. And then our equipment replacement program for the upcoming year, you can see we have 19 units scheduled for replacement, and those are, that's all equipment that we use on a daily basis. Fairway mowers, rough mowers, greens mowers. We have a greens roller, a couple in there, sprayers and turf vacuums, and that's $982,000 for that. 13 vehicles are scheduled for replacement. Those are 11 light and heavy duty utility carts that we use on a daily basis, 1 pickup truck for transportation, and 1 dump truck, which is shared between the 7 golf courses. And I think that replaces a 1994 Isuzu pickup truck or dump truck. So it's got some miles on it. And that's for $357,000. And I'd like to note that every year during this process, budget process on the equipment replacement, these are all listed on the reserve study. So we go through that, we review that, and we look at each piece. And if it doesn't need to be replaced, we'll move that out to the next year or even beyond, depending on its condition. So if it's not sitting in the shop and we're not putting a lot of money and time into it for repairs, we're going to keep it for another year or two, okay? So we delayed the purchase of 4 units this year for a total of $161,560. And our total equipment replacement cost comes in at $1.3 million or $191,387 per golf course. All right, this is just the summary of the equipment that we're replacing. You can see the average age is 10.5 years. And then the vehicle replacement. You can see that 94 Isuzu up there, dump truck, but the average age is 13 years. So we're getting a lot of life out of our equipment. We're well beyond the useful life on the industry standard on our equipment. And I credit our mechanics for that. Their preventative maintenance program that they have on our equipment, they keep it in good shape and keep it up and running. So credit to them. All right, I didn't know if you wanted, do you want me? Yep, just Desert Trails Pro Shop parking lot asphalt replacement for $135,000. This is in the reserve study. And then in golf operations, rental carts, we have 20 rental carts that are up for replacement or additional, I believe, for $129,000. That's it?
Okay. Directors, do we have any comment or questions for Todd? Yes, Director Vines.
Thank you, President Hurley. Todd, I'm sorry,
Yes.
Yesterday at the golf meeting, I forgot to ask this question, was with the golf carts, the replacement, are they being split equally among the golf courses?
know what,
Sorry, Pat,
I'm gonna have-
sorry to make you
I'm
have to
going to
get up.
have Pat come up and give you the correct answer on that.
Okay. Sorry about that, Pat.
Getting him some steps.
Good morning, everyone. So 20 carts that we will be purchasing or planning on purchasing. We replace carts as needed at each of the facilities, so all 20 typically don't go to one golf
No,
course.
equally, sparingly at the courses, how are they going?
Right, so we look at it, we've got an inventory list and ages of each golf cart, and we replace them a lot like Todd does. If we're seeing a lot of money being put into a golf cart, that one gets pulled and we put it in that particular golf course. So it's not uncommon to have 5 at Echo Mesa
Oh,
and
okay.
5 somewhere else.
Oh, okay, great, thanks, Pat.
The General Manager would like to make a comment.
Yeah, thank you. And Lisa, coming up on this agenda, we have item 3.07 where we talk about golf carts and ADA. So the dollar amount that I think we're reflecting here today may change as we move forward through this capital budget due to some projected acquisitions of some ADA handicap accessible carts that we're looking at.
Super. I didn't know if you were going to talk about that today, so great. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, Director Novello.
This may be similar in terms of what we just heard from Carl in terms of replacement, but in terms of the old carts that are no longer available, what happens to them? Are they Pat, are they also turned back in, or are they up for sale?
Yeah, we trade them in.
Okay.
Typically, these are easy-go golf carts. Our sales rep, over the last few years, was willing to give a value to them, but we found outside sourcing that we were able to maximize that value and sell them for that. So typically, we've been getting around $1,500 to $1,700 trade-in value.
So that this would be the net expenditure then, in terms of the budgeted amount for the replacement golf cart?
Actually, that's not calculated in there as far as
Okay.
the trade-in value. So we pay about $6,500 a cart for new ones,
Mhm.
and then
And we'll get a little something.
due to the accounting process, it shows up somewhere else.
Thank you.
That's right.
Cliff Swan, CFO. Those carts are well beyond fully depreciated. So those go through the disposal process, and they enter the income statement down in the capital section as a gain on sale. You're welcome.
Okay, we have any more questions? Do you have something else?
Yeah, I do. If I could just make a comment about, since we're talking about what we do with our old equipment. With our old maintenance equipment, when we're done with those, there's not a lot of meat on the bone on those. So we have the mechanics come over and they go through it, they strip all those down, and then we put those on the shelf and we can reuse those because we're all Toro equipment. So everything can be interchanged between the golf courses. So we get good use out of that, and we'll put that on our inventory. So if somebody needs a part for a mower or a cart or something like that, they have that on the shelf. So it saves a little bit of money by doing that. But there's not much left to our, just a carcass when they get done with those.
Everything but the oink.
Yep. Right, thank you.
All right, Amy, Chris, because of this is so important, if we have any questions from the audience, we'll entertain them now for either Carl or Todd. It didn't go that far. All right. If we have no questions, we'll go ahead and move on. All right. Budgetary index presentation discussions. Director Rhodes.
I'd like to open this up. I'm going to make some preliminary comments, and then I'm going to pass this off to Christine and to Mr. Gary Bosak. Every year in February, this year, February the 20th, Mr. Schwind will present the budget or the proposed budget. And then through a series of meetings and over a period of time, we will massage that and then come up with some kind of a recommendation, modifications, or whatever. But we're always looking for something that will help us in this process to make it as transparent as we can, to ensure that everyone understands the rationale. So I think this issue came up last spring, and we talked about looking at, is there some type of an index? Is there some kind of some data that we could use that would be somewhat standardized, what we could look at? So as chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee, I commissioned a working group of people. And our intent was to assist in the formulation of policy discussions, specifically for the question of creation and the use of an economic index for budget formulation purposes. So that's a pretty vague instructions. But we asked Mr. Gary Bosak, who is standing right over here by the podium. We asked Mr. Ray Davis, who is not here because of family illnesses. And we asked Cliff Swan to sit on this, and I believe that Terry West also sat on this from the staff. And then Christine Novello, Director Novello, served as an advisor for them. And they went through a whole series of public meetings and deliberations. So at that, I'm going to save the kind of the meat on the bone, as we just heard, and pass this over to Director Novello.
Thank you very much, Director Rhodes, and good morning to everybody. We were commissioned, as Director Rhodes just mentioned, we were commissioned in September of this year, but the discussions really did start in the spring. Would we be better served to compare some of our budgetary processes, some of our increases and so forth, to financial indices to economic indices to benchmark those and so forth. So lots of questions came up, I believe it was last spring and during the budgetary cycle. Is there a better way to proceed forward? As we came together as a Budget and Finance Committee this fall, Director Rhodes put together this working group, and I'm really proud to have been the facilitator and advisor to that group. We had 8 meetings that were all public, that meaning they were open to any one of our residents and owners. Only a few folks dropped in on those meetings, but we were as transparent as we could be and open to those inputs as we went. So a lot of work did go into this, a lot of work and analysis. And what we did was, going back to a meeting in October, I believe it was, that was when we did a detailed presentation. Both Ray and Gary, who you'll be hearing from in a moment, gave a very detailed presentation and analysis at the Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Due to some other things that have come up in the interim, it just took a little while for us to get here to the board workshop, but really pleased to do that. In the meantime, for any of you who did attend the meeting in October, there are a few factual tweaks that we made to the slides that you're about to see. Really not a huge deal, but if you wanted to go back, you could very easily go back and see the original presentation. You could listen to the original presentation in full, but today, again, I'm joined by Gary Bosak. Ray's not here, but he and Ray put together a really nice presentation with the help of Cliff Swan and Terry West to walk us through. So I wanted to thank them. And in particular, as we close the session today, you'll see a little very specific influence from my advisory skills. But without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Gary Bosak and to our CFO, Cliff Swan.
Thank you, Dick and Christine, governing board members, and respected participants for showing up today in our meeting. Thanks for coming. The way we're going to approach this today is I'll give you an idea of what our charge was, and then I'm going to ask Cliff to give you an idea of the current process that's in place, sort of as a bench line for you to build from with the information that you're going to hear after that. And we'll go through all the information. I'm going to presume that most of you poured through this ahead of time, so you kind of know where we're headed. I only hear one chuckle. That means there's, well, 2 chuckles, okay.
Well, at least Director Vines also came and joined in on a few of the meetings,
Yeah.
so I think you have some good background there.
Well, it's just like a good book. I know most of you just went to the last page to see what the result was, and then you sort of go back to the front and see how you got there. But we do have a lot of information to share, and I'm going to presume that you're going to follow through on your laptops, and the audience will follow through on the big screen. So that said, I'll ask Cliff to kind of bring you up to speed on what we do today. You have already seen this, but our challenge was to identify and collect and analyze the data to see if it was useful for the indexing application in the budget process, provide a rationale to either accept or reject indexing as a way to go about building that process, and then make a recommendation to the Budget and Finance Committee, which we did on October 26th. And today we're presenting it to the governing board. So our mission has been pursued, and now I'll ask Cliff to.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Gary, and good morning, governing board. So one of the things we were trying to accomplish in this process is to determine if there is a key indicator that could help us in the budgeting process or help us with determining what our fees or dues increases would be each year. So, in our current process, I want to talk about what we currently do and what our policies are around that, and then I'll turn it back over to Gary to talk about the analysis. But FI 15 is a policy that explains the preparation of the annual financial plan, and it provides the framework for the planning and execution of the budget. We start this process, the budgeting process, in September with the capital improvements, and we're halfway through that, and we'll continue to present those capital budgets as we move throughout the process with changes until they're voted on. And then And then we move into the next calendar year. So we're on a fiscal year basis. So we go from July 1 through June 30. So we start after 6 months putting together a projection for the current year, and then we build a budget based on that for the following year. But we look at the components of the annual financial plan. We provide some analysis on the expense, including full-time equivalents and employees and headcounts and positions and all those things. And then on the operating expenses, we give details into that, revenue, and then capital projects. And then we also present a financial 5-year forecast. So when we dig into budgeting, one of the things that I talked about to this working group is that we currently use many indicators that help us. Some of those indicators are mandated to us, like minimum wage, but other indicators like inflation and things like that, we take a look at that as we're putting the budget together. So, and we start with some strategic meetings with our management team. And first of all, we look at the services that we're providing. Are there any changes to the services that we provide to you and to the community? And that's the baseline for our labor, because 65% of our overall budget, for the most part, is tied to labor, because that's what we are. We're a service industry. So we take a look at the services and we start building our labor budget on that. And then typically we budget a merit increase, which is roughly around 3% per year. And then we take a look at those mandated minimum wage requirements from the state of Arizona, and we have to incorporate those into the budget as well. And then we sit down with the management team and start crafting the other operating expenses, things like seed and maintenance and the like. So we take a look at the current fiscal year operating and base a projection on that. Now, we incorporate, and every year there's some non-recurring items that happen throughout the year. So we take those out, and then we take a look at the next year non-recurring items, things that come up on maintenance schedules, things like that, and add those. So that's part of the process, and then we apply an inflationary factor to start with to the other operating expenses, and then drill down from there. So that's how we kind of craft the other line item operating expenses in the budget. One thing that we don't talk a lot about is the capital budget. I think because of the way we allocate our money through our policies, we like to look at the operating budget as just down in the capital section, and APFs pay for that. Well, honestly, we have one big bucket of money. The vast majority comes from dues at 46%, golf revenue at 33%, and APFs at 14%. That's 94% of the overall bucket of money that we have. And we use that money to pay for our operations and pay for our capital expenditures. And then at the end of that, we have something called a reserve fund. And policy dictates how much we have to have in that reserve fund. And a lot of times I think that gets lost. But we need to understand that we have one big bucket of money. And if Carl comes and says, hey, I need to do an asphalt project, it comes out of that bucket. You got to fund payroll, it comes out of that bucket. It might be allocated in different ways, but it's one big bucket of money. So when we take a look at the capital budget, we use that bucket of money to fund that as well. And we apply inflation and different things, different factors to that, other indices. So I'm going to turn this back over to Gary. He'll take it from here.
So the different indexes that we looked at are on the screen right now. You can see the ones that you're most familiar with: the consumer price index, the cost of living adjustment, COLA, and inflation rate we refer to as an index, even though it's a little bit different than the previous two. And then we had a piece of input from one of our former Budget and Finance Committee members, John Holbolt, sent us a very detailed analysis on indexing that he suggested that we consider. So the bottom two were those that he suggested we take a look at, which we did. And we found that they were either fairly close to what the top three were, or they got us off into a little bit different area that we didn't really want to make things more difficult. We're trying to keep things simple. So We reverted back to the top three, and those are the three that we agreed to look at. So the CPI, it measures the overall change in consumer prices based on a representative basket of goods and services with an assigned weight over a period of time. That basket changes over time. Depends what the services and the products that people are buying to get current, so probably every 10 or 12 or 15 years. But that particular index has been around since 1913. So there's a lot of opportunity for comparison, analysis, and learning that takes place when you get into that particular one. The cost of living is one that most of you are concerned about because that's what dictates the Social Security and the Social Security supplemental adjustments that are made every year. A couple of years ago, we were all really happy on one hand, understanding that it was 8.7, but the downside was that was an offset to the inflation, which was about the same, if not higher. And so on a net income basis, you probably didn't gain anything from it. This year's was 3.2%. And that number and that adjustment is calculated from the third quarter. And it's done year to year. It's kind of a flat period of time for comparison. And at the end of that third quarter, the determination on what that percentage will be is published, and then it's carried forward, and that's what your Social Security benefit is increased by January 1st of the following year. Then the inflation rate, which measures the yearly change in the CPI between the two periods of time, this year and last year. What you paid for a particular item last year versus what you paid for it this year, all that gathered together generates an inflation rate, which, as most of you know, the last 3 years has been very significant compared to history, and we'll share some of that with you. So those three indexes that we chose to use are almost joined at the hip. They're very, very integrated with each other. In the most simplest terms, the Consumer Price Index is used to measure inflation. That's the calculation that actually measures what inflation is. The cost of living then, we already defined for you. Then the inflation rate is the year-to-year change between the CPI in a period of time. So those are the three that we zeroed in on. There's three charts that we wanted to share with you. One is inflation versus dues. Inflation being the gold or green line down below, and the dues increases being the blue line. You can see that most years we wound up increasing dues at a rate significantly higher, or not so significantly, compared to previous. And we went back to 2009. So the last 15 years, that's what the adjustments, inflation and dues looks like. And what that has done is put us in a position to do all the things that you've heard talked about today. Not only keep the levels of service at the specific level that they are, but the facilities looking fresh and renewed, and those increases in dues allowed us to do that. The next screen then shows the minimum wage versus inflation, and this is a real eye-opener. The minimum wage tracked fairly evenly all the way up until 2016, when the minimum wage jumped from $8.05 to $10 an hour. And that increase was very, very significant. Of course, had an even more significant impact on Sun City West because a lot of our people, upwards of 76%, are affected by minimum wage increases. So it's a very, very large part of what happened to us from an expense standpoint. Then it kind of flattened out again back to almost an even keel for the next few years, and again, we'll share more of that with you. And the last one is the cost of living versus dues. And what makes this one interesting, again, they track fairly reflective of each other all the way until 2020. And I just want to hasten to mention to you that Cliff mentioned that our calendar year, our fiscal year is not a calendar year. And all the numbers that we're going to show you today are government-generated annual numbers. So if you wanted to come up with something literal on Sun City West information, you'd be hard-pressed to find a number that was there somewhere, because you take the front half or the back half of our fiscal year to make it the same as what you're comparing to the government's information. So in this case, in 2020 was the first COVID year, and the COLA went up about 1.2%. And as you can see, the following year, when we were recovering from that, there was no dues increase. And then what's very interesting is when you look at 2021, the 5 point, it kind of gets lost in the ski slope there, but right at the beginning, 2 years over, it's 5.8%. And that's what the adjustment was in a year that we had zero dues increase. And then the next year, it increased all the way up to 8.7% as a COLA, and our dues increase was only 2.4%. So the significant issue about all of those is that the dues increases during that period of time were much less than what the COLA was, and the inflation that we were trying to counter and had to deal with on virtually every expense item, in some cases, put us really behind the 8 ball, and we'll share more of that shortly. So this is kind of a recap that we added from the original presentation that you may have seen at the Budget and Finance Committee. Increases in those elements since 2017. The COLA has gone up 24.8%, inflation 24.7%, and we said before, one mirrors the other because that's how inflation is determined. Sun City West dues have gone up 22%, haven't kept pace with inflation, and the minimum wage 57.9%. Very dramatic increase. And if you wanted to add the CPI to the front of that, it would be 28.6%. So it also falls fairly much in line with the others. Okay, I promised Christine I would show you this because this is her favorite thing. What we did is we put on a spreadsheet all 4 elements, the CPI, the COLA, the dues increase, and the inflation number. And that's what it looked like. So that became a work document, and to make some sense for it and make it easier for you to look at, we broke things down into 3 yearly segments, 6 years, 6 years, and 3 years, because that's where a significant break took place. So 3 cautions before we get into this. It's not very often a good idea to use averages to average, and yet the 3 things that we did this time are so close in their results and their utilization that I think we got away with it, but generally you wouldn't want to do that. The second thing is the calendar year comparison to the governmental information, which I mentioned. And then the third would be that we are consumer driven in Sun City West, and we are not an organization necessarily that reflects what these indexes reflect. So take consumer price index as a literal terminology. It's the indexing of what consumers pay for products. We as a community pay some of those same kinds of costs and increases, but at the same time, we're an organization that we have a lot of expenses that don't even relate to those things that are considered when driving the resulting indexes. So if you look at the first 6 years, or 6 years, the average dues increase was 3.9%. The index average of all 3 of those was 1.7. The next 6 years, 3.5, and the indexing 1.5. If we had been locked into an index increase, in particular for dues during those periods of time, imagine what we would have looked at over that 12-year period, increasing dues only 1.6 or 1.7%. Would have put a terrible crimp in our ability to pay our bills, maintain our facilities, and provide the level of service that you all want and deserve. Then the inflation bug happened, and in the next 3 years, 21 to 22, 23, the dues increase went up 2.8%, still not a large amount, and the indexing average jumped up to 5.6%. Literally those 3 years, inflation went up almost 17% as a national number, and if you read and heard and listened to the same kind of information I did, Arizona was always described as having one of the higher inflation rates in the entire country, primarily because of housing. And so to look at that kind of increase every year, 6 or 7% every year, would have been unfair because it wasn't necessary based on what the dues actually were required for us. So either way you look at it, not enough or maybe possibly too much, it made a little bit of sense not to consider using index. So if we had considered using this, the rationale for accepting indexing as a method of arriving at particularly dues increases, it really makes the annual budgeting process much easier. You just apply in a percentage all the way across the board. It simplifies the decision-making process. We don't go through this shadow boxing every spring about what dues should happen. And it matches the volatility of inflation because the dues go up at the same rate as inflation would go up, for example. But as Cliff said in his presentation, they do already consider inflation in many of the decisions that they make when they put the plan together currently. So rejecting that rationale for using indexing, if we use it for the budgeting process, it could be seen as rubber stamping or possibly providing unnecessary increases. The minimum wage increases are mandated by the state of Arizona. We don't have any control over those. And as you saw, they've been really, really significant. Just for your information, about half the states in the country today still are at $7.25. Arizona's, of course, at $14.35. And I think you said the other day there's some petitions being signed to take that up to $18 sometime in the future. If it comes to a vote, you know what to vote no for. That would be a devastating blow to us. I can't even imagine dealing with that. The inflation indices already have been factored into the budget and considered when we come up with a percentage of dues. No one wants to increase dues any more than are necessary to continue to provide the services and the quality facilities that we have. And the bottom line to all the committee's considerations on that always comes back to those two things, and then you throw in the fully funded balance for the reserve fund, and that becomes the third driver of consideration. So none of the existing indices are solely based on specific types of expenses incurred to retain the existing levels of service or the quality of those. And just for example, Cliff mentioned this the other day, we spent $200,000 in paint to restripe parking lots. No indices has that considered in it. We spent over $500,000 on seed and fertilizer. Nobody else has to deal with that kind of thing. So you could go on and on and on with those kinds of expenses that we have to deal with that most other organizations don't, and certainly you as consumers don't. So when these indices are gathered, the basket of services and products that you wind up spending money on are those things that you look at every single day when you go shopping, or when you get in your car, or when you pay insurance on your house, or if you want to buy a house. Those are the things that go into those considerations. The annual budget struggle is a necessary part of the compromise, and we always find every year that we do go through that struggle, but we find it to be a plus. We know that the result that we get out of those conversations is one that is far from being a rubber stamp, and it also brings a lot of things to light that causes conversation to take place, which makes us a better organization and a better place to live. Lastly, I just want to suggest to you that this testing of the idea of the COLA, we actually had a referendum on that item very directly in 2012. There were 3 items that were attempted to be put into the bylaws as changes, and the third one was using the cost of living adjustment to determine what the percent of increase for dues the following year was going to be. That year, 15,000 people showed up to vote. 13,000 people roughly said no to all 3 of those amendment suggestions, but the third one in particular was rejected by 83% of the population. So I think the community understands the importance of dues and how what we pay for what we get is something that, again, keeps us looking fresh, keeps us at the service levels that we want to achieve. And so from our standpoint, that was kind of a referendum. So our conclusion, we strongly recommended not to include indexing in the FI-15 policy, and that policy is the preparation of the annual financial plan, for those of you that may not be familiar with it. We also suggested that operations continue to consider indexing when creating the annual financial plan. Just keep doing what you're doing is the bottom line. And that the planners, most of the people in this room, should be bold in their assumption that most of the people, the vast majority of people in Sun City West, want us to keep the service levels and the quality of our facilities at the level that they're at, if not better. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is because we're able to pay proper wages to our people to keep them. One of our neighbors has a turnover rate of over 47%. Ours is a little over 20%. And I attribute that to great supervision, people liking what they do, but more importantly, we're paying a very competitive wage. And so we've been able to stabilize, in particular, the golf side of things, where most of that minimum wage increase comes from. So here's Christine's contribution, among others, at the very end.
I hope I contributed more than that. But.
No, I was going to get to that. She's thanking the Rolling Stone for that, and if you've seen her in her concerts, I've heard her sing this, so she's really good at that. But You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, well, you might just find that you get what you need. So that's that part of the presentation. I did want to just highlight, because this is one of the first work groups I think that you had. I know you went through a lot of analysis to try to come up with that concept. And I would just say to you that the way Christine managed this work group was exemplary and should serve as a model for what others want to do. She, using a racing analogy, she used spurs and a whip when appropriate, and don't get too carried away with that. Coming into the last quarter mile, she turned us loose and gave us our head, but she was always there with a better suggestion and an alternative thought. And as an advisor, we were rich in our experience with her in that role, and only because of that were we able to come up with what we think is a pretty significant presentation. So I want to thank her publicly for her role, and Dick for allowing us to do this. So thanks very much.
Thank you,
Any
Gary.
questions?
Just one quick add, if I may, and thank you for that. Very fine compliment. It was a lot of great analysis, and the reason why I asked Gary to bring that working sheet is that it's an eye chart. If anybody wants to see it, Gary's very passionate about it. He'll walk you through the whole thing, but a lot of work went in. But the Rolling Stones may not be, the economic sage and so forth, but it seemed like an apt conclusion for many reasons. And all tongue in cheek aside, I do love rock and roll and so forth, but the quote is really meant to encapsulate this notion of a struggle. Because when I first became more involved in the Budget and Finance Committee and now with the Governing Board directly, it seemed some of the discussions seemed to be very prolonged and a bit inefficient to me as an outside observer, and I wondered if there was a way to improve them. But the struggle really yields a really high quality result. And I came away last year in particular realizing that if there are always many different opinions and inputs and insights in a community like this that's so rich in expertise from our operations staff as well as our residents. But if any one or group of people comes away feeling that they have really won all of their arguments, then we have failed as a group, because you can't get everything that you want. But if you work together as we do in this community, it may not always be pretty, and it may not always feel very happy and sunshiny, in all honesty, but the struggle is essential. And those were, Ray's words on the slide were about this struggle that we go through every year. It's because it yields such a quality result, because we do not want to miss anything, and we don't want to rubber stamp any decisions at all. So in all honesty, the Rolling Stones quote seemed a really nice and pleasant way to wrap up that notion that you really can't get everything that you need, but by trying and working together, we really do get, we can't always get what we want, but we do get what we need in the end. So my notes there, and now we're open for questions on the concept and what our conclusions were.
Director Schlimmer.
Thank you, Chairman Hurley. First, kudos, thank you. Really great presentation, and to both of you and the rest of the committee, my appreciation. This is an interesting concept, and when it came up before I was on governing board, the idea of this index discussion was beginning when I was sitting out there observing, and I thought it was an interesting idea. I wasn't sure at that time I was sold on it, but I thought it was an interesting idea, and I think your analysis is really good. I just want to make one comment. I think the crux of your analysis falls into slides 9 and 10, because in my work life, I manage 31 different budgets for 31 different entities, and similar in a much smaller scale, but similar to kind of what we do here. And I always get this question when we are talking about what the costs are going to be for the upcoming fiscal year in those groups of, well, why is it higher or why is it lower than what my inflation rate is? Why is inflation at 3% and you're proposing a budget that's up 6%? And it all comes down to the basket of goods and services in your basket versus the basket of goods and services in those indexes. And it can't, unless you mirror that exactly, it can't work. So you guys ended at a point where I thought you would probably come out, which was you really can't easily tie this. And I think slide 10, I think it's 10, really shows that very, very well. So I really appreciate that. I think Christine echoes it well. Our role here is to make sure we're doing all the right things for the community. I think we need to continue to do that. And we can't be worried about whether our basket of goods and services exactly mirrors a consumer price index or something like that. What we do need to be worried about, are we doing the right things and making the right decisions, and as you said, making the tough choices.
Thank you.
All right.
Any online? Okay.
I'm sorry? Kate,
Any
did you have a
questions
comment?
online?
Any questions online? No.
No? Okay.
So we don't need a motion to do this, but can I get consensus to drop the idea of using an index to fix dues? Yes. Okay, all right. No further action is needed on that then. Thank you, Gary.
Tim. I'd actually like to, and I've said this before, but I want to say it again. I want to publicly thank Gary and Ray Davis, Christine, Cliff Swan, and Terry West, because they did the heavy lifting on this. They held public meetings. We did have, it was sparsely attended, but we did have attendance, and we considered all the feedback. But there was a lot of effort that went into this, and I just have to congratulate them. I've heard this presentation a couple of times, and every time I hear it, I get more convinced that, boy, we really are. This is the right answer. There is a reason why we are consistently identified as one of the top 5 or 10 retirement communities in the nation. And that's because we pay attention to detail. We pay attention to replacement. We pay attention to utilities, to sporting equipment, to conditions of our properties, but we pay attention to how much money do we need to do that. And we can't compare ourselves with anybody else, because it's always, what does this mean to me? And when I say me, I'm talking about Sun City West. And this is just another piece of the cog on why we are where we are. And so I congratulate the group of people that did this for producing an excellent, excellent document and some tremendous research. Thank you very much.
You're
Okay.
welcome. And we want to thank that there were some residents who wrote to us and stopped us and gave us input, as Director Rhodes had mentioned. It was in the middle of or right at the beginning of the season, so there were a lot of folks who were still traveling in, but they did write to us, and we considered all of that input. So thanks for those who did provide that input, and please continue it.
Okay, we don't have any comments online, but do we have any comments from the audience on this topic? Okay, we're going to move right along. Recommendation discussion, credit card transactions fees. Director Rhodes.
Thank you. I'm going to read a recommendation, but before I do, I want to preface some comments. This is going to be basically the same recommendation that the Budget and Finance Committee provided last year. I think last year we were very naive. We thought all we had to do was to tell Katie to just go ahead and put an extra button on there and we'll start charging transaction fees. Well, we all know that there's nothing even close to that. That the more we look into this, it's like unpeeling that onion. It gets more and more complicated. So we worked and we struggled in the Budget and Finance Committee for some time. And every time we thought we were getting close, something else would pop up. My wife calls it whack-a-mole. You look at one thing, you address it, and something else pops up. And that's what was happening when we tried to identify say a partial implementation. There's really, in the most basic form, there's only 2 answers to this. One is that we continue incorporating transaction fees in our budget, and 2, we pass those fees along. Well, the answer is probably a hybrid somewhere, but we couldn't get to that. So the Budget and Finance Committee came up with a recommendation, and Tim, I'll read it now. So, and this is item 3.04, credit card fees recommendation per the October the 24th Budget and Finance Committee. The Budget and Finance Committee recommends the governing board approve that credit card transaction fees be assessed for all credit card purchases within Sun City West.
Okay, we have any discussion on this? Director Vines, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the golf committee say no to passing on credit card fees?
Yes, that is correct.
Yes, they said no.
Yes, they
Okay.
said no. That is correct.
All right, do we have any other discussion about credit card fees at this point? Yes, Director Vines.
I'm a little confused by this recommendation, because when we had earlier discussion regarding this topic, it seemed like the number that was thrown around was, at the time, we have like 4 different point of sales, so it's going to take some time to get there. Is that still where we're at? And at the time, it was like a number was thrown around about, like, Katie, I think, had mentioned somewhere along the way that it was going to be like a $50,000 on her end for IT for us to even get there. So it seems like this recommendation is a little misleading. It's just like wanting carte blanche to go forward with something that.
It's a recommendation to move it to a vote for the board, okay? And if we have any other comments on this, because I'm going to make a comment on it. I would like consensus to move this to the general manager so that he can provide us with some information at the general meeting. One is the feasibility of charging credit card fees at all of our point of sales, the cost to plan and implement the changes necessary, and a timeline for planning and implementing. Basically, can we do it? How long is it going to take, and how much is it going to cost? And how much are the real savings by doing this? Okay, do I have consensus for that? Christine?
I do, and just to make another comment, the Budget and Finance Committee, this was not unanimous. We went back and forth, and there were several other committees that have had some concerns. This would be, if I hear our consensus, is to get some of the details that we would need in order to consider it, number one. The other thing that I believe we would consider, once we have those facts, assuming we go forward, ask the general manager for that, we need to think about what this will do, or what the potential consumer reactions would be. We've had a lot of discussion amongst the various committees over the past 18 months about that. Well, what kind of behavior will this drive? And so on and so forth. But we first need to begin with some more data and facts and to get that clear, in my view. So by establishing a consensus, I want to be sure that everybody listening understands we're not approving it, we're not recommending it, we just need some facts. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically, we're moving it on. We've been discussing this for almost a year and a half, and it needs to come to a head. We need to decide one way or the other. We need the facts to back up our decision, and that's what the consensus would request the general manager provide us. Alan, do you have a comment?
Before I make this, I want to ask a point of order question. Do you want to hear any comments about whether we are supportive or not supportive of the recommendation, or is this just simply move it forward and we'll have that discussion in a later meeting?
Yes, to move it forward, to get the additional information I'm asking the general manager for, and at that time, we will discuss it, and if we need to take a vote then, we will, or if not, we'll take a vote at another regular meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Vines?
Thank you, President Hurley. So I'm just a little confused. Are we disregarding Director Rhodes' recommendation and just going for consensus based on what you're asking then?
I don't want to put words in Director Rhodes' mouth, but this is basically to move it down the road, rather than kick the can down the road, to move it to a point where we actually take action on it.
Because what you're asking, I don't have any problem with what you're asking for, but this recommendation here is totally different. Director Rhodes' recommendation.
It's just a recommendation.
But what you're asking for, I'm totally on board with, because it spells everything out. I
Right.
don't have a problem with that consensus.
Right.
I do have a problem with this recommendation, however.
It's just a recommendation. It's not a motion. It's just a matter of moving it to a different level. All right? Dick?
So the consensus is that you're asking us for is, do we want additional data so we can make a decision on the recommendation? Am I correct?
Right now, this has been talked about at the committee level, okay? We've had limited discussion at the board level, okay? What I'm asking for is to have the information that we need to make a decision one way or the other, and I'm not advocating either way, but to have that information so that we can have a discussion at the board level, whether or not we want to do this. Director Rhodes.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I wanted to mention, and Christina's right, this was a 6-1 vote in the Budget and Finance Committee. Okay, last year was 7-0. The issue that we wanted to push is, do we really want to do this? You know, and you're exactly right. The governing board has never reached a position as, do we even want to apply? Do we want to continue with subsidizing our budget with that, whatever the number is, $700 million? Just make that up.
No.
I'm sorry.
1,603, what is it, Bill?
It wasn't
600,000?
700.
He does pay attention when we're talking.
$700,000. Okay, not 700 million. I'm sorry, that was my fault. Whatever that number is, do we want to continue to incorporate that into the budget, or do we want to make the decision to pass the charge along? Now, we worked for several meetings on trying to piece together some hybrid version of, well, what if we do this just in member services? Well, only if it's member services, we could only do homeowners. We couldn't do associates. We couldn't do all of those other categories. So the position of Budget and Finance Committee was, let's throw the gauntlet down. Let's make the recommendation. Every transaction would be on a credit card transaction would be we would pass the fees along. So that's really the issue, is we wanted to throw the gauntlet down to say, what are we going to do here?
Right.
Can we move along? Now, they have made progress. I know that Katie's made a lot of progress on using the electronic check and such in a very short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that I really know what that is right now. But this is the crux: is can we do this, and how much?
Can we have it by the general meeting? 25th? 25th? Yeah. You tell me, how much time do you need to put it together?
Yes. Yes.
End of month? Yes. All right. Our general meeting's on the 25th. Okay, so do I have consensus to do that? Yes. Okay. And as Dick mentioned, Katie has made some progress. We'd like to understand what that progress is so we know where we are in the process. Okay? Yes? Yes. 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 Okay. You don't need a second for consensus. Okay, Director Rhodes, you have another recommendation.
This is item 305. It's a family pass. The Budget and Finance Committee recommends the governing board approve maintaining the current policy for guest access and sign-in, which are in accordance with the current association bylaws, but also establish an age limit under which the guest fee would no longer be charged.
You have a recommendation for the age limit?
The issue was that we didn't want the monitor to have to worry about determining the age.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so probably like 2 or 3 years old.
Yeah, we went back and forth on,
We went back and
because I
forth.
chaired that
I don't
particular
think there
meeting.
was a strong feeling on that. The issue we were dealing with, we do not want to put an onus of responsibility on the monitor to start policing how old they are.
Right.
And the consensus that we reached at the time for the governing board was, it was some great suggestions, and this particular one actually came from one of our members that stepped to the microphone because we were going back and forth, or we had been going back and forth on this notion since last spring as well. So rather than coming up with all the operational changes and so forth, this doesn't solve the problem, but at least it reduces the exposure for our residents who are bringing in family members, and for the young children who are not going to have the patience to stay or to use our facilities for hours on end. This would seem to be a good compromise for, because we had a few folks in the audience who originally brought this notion up. So again, it seemed like a good way to at least take a step in the right direction. No particular age limit or consensus was reached, but rather to establish an age limit that would make sense. And I believe operations could probably have a great input on that. I don't know if it needs to necessarily be a policy driven by the board, but just to say, let's come up with an age limit and make it consistent.
Okay, any other discussion? Jack?
So then what was driving the family pass was a discount that the families were seeking. So your recommendation is to not do that?
We looked at the discount issue from a financial perspective. And the short answer to your question is yes, we decided not to do this. The range was so significant because then we have to define, well, what is a family pass? You know, the apparent one was for children. Well, no, because we got feedback from other community members. Well, my brother's coming in from Des Moines, and and his kids, and where do we define family pass? So without really going into a lot of statistics and detail, the range was something like $150,000 loss to 40 or 50, something like that. It was in there. Now, this is a double-edged sword because, and let's just pretend it's $100,000. That $100,000 is coming off of the budget. That means to come back to where we were, we had to gain it somewhere else.
Right.
Okay. So Jack, the answer to your question is we did consider that and discounted it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, do I have consensus to move this to the governing board meeting for a vote? All right, Karen, we're going to put this in the general meeting. Okay, moving right along. RR&P revision update. Director Leary.
Okay, thank you. We have completed, the Chartered Clubs Committee has completed the detailed review of every single word in the proposed RR&Ps. There are some additional changes that came out of our December 21st meeting. What we're going to do going forward is discuss any changes in the regular meeting, so we'll go back to our one meeting a month. At this point, what the committee wants to do is a holistic review of the proposed RR&Ps as opposed to a detailed review to make sure that all the pieces fit together and that we've covered things. We also want to incorporate some new information that came out during this whole process, so that was valuable for us to do that. So beginning in February, we will start going over those refinements, as I refer to them. The goal is to get something to the governing board by the end of this fiscal year to approve.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any comments on this? Okay, any comments from the audience on Jack's comments? Okay, moving right along. Golf cart discussion, ADA rules. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you very much. We briefly touched on it when we were talking about capital improvements and golf carts. But as we sit here today, a couple of ADA issues have arisen when it comes to the usability of our facilities. We have a policy in place currently that has basically limitations as far as the number of golf carts that we allow out on the course during the course of the day, and particularly per tee time. So we do allow foursomes, and we do allow 2 carts to go out, and that minimizes the impact on the turf conditions out there that we kind of came to love. And And so we're kind of gone back to a pre-COVID standard as far as how many carts we let out on the golf course, which is 2. And so we do that as best we can. And if any issues arise in the world of the ADA, I mean, the key words there are reasonable accommodation. And we do a pretty good job doing that. But what we've kind of found in our fleet inventory is that the ADA cart that we kind of share amongst 7 courses is a little bit light when it comes to the fleet, of course, of carts that we do own. So we're going to be looking at adding a few more golf carts to our fleet that are that make any kind of handicap issue a little bit more accessible to the users and those in desire. If they've recently had a surgery or something and they need a different kind of cart to drive, we're looking at the 3-wheel versions, which are electric golf carts, that kind of tricycle type things, less impact on the turf, and allowing folks to kind of utilize those. So a little bit of a bump in the capital budget coming up, but in speaking with attorneys on the subject of ADA and what we are required to do in those types of situations, the recommendation moving forward is what we're kind of talking about now, just increase our fleet a little bit and provide that service. So you'll be seeing that in the near future.
Okay, any questions on that discussion? Yes, Director Vines.
Thank you, President Hurley. Thank you, Bill, for that. If I'm not mistaken, in yesterday's golf meeting, we talked about possibly adding maybe 1 of those carts per golf course. Is that still on the horizon, or?
I mean, it is. That's a step in the right direction, definitely. But I think if you look at national standards and some of the recommendations that we're kind of doing research on, they're recommending 2 per course, just so you can get more than 1 person out there. And the fact that battery charges are good for several hours. But just to be able to provide that accommodation, I think in time we want to get there. But we can incrementally take care of that when it comes to budgeting.
Perfect, great, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate it.
You want to describe some of the things we're going to have to do in order to do that?
When it comes to, obviously, the electric type batteries that we're dealing with, when you store those indoors, you all have seen and heard of instances where some of these type batteries can cause fire. So that's a little bit of an insurance hit on us. So we want to make sure our insurance agents are aware that we're using that type of battery. We have ample storage and making sure they're insured.
Okay. Any comments from the audience on this? Okay. That concludes our agenda. We're going to do director comments. We'll start down with Director Novello.
No further comments?
Director Vines?
No comments, thanks.
Director Leary?
No comments.
Director Williamson, do we have any comments from online?
No, we do not, and I have no further comments either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Rhodes?
No, other than I wanted to tell Veronica that we're very excited about hearing more about this. I think it's very, very positive thing.
Director Schlemmer?
I just want to echo as well. We had a couple of presentations today from various guests and committee, subcommittee teams. Thank you. And like Director Rhodes said, very exciting opportunity. And I want to thank the presentation of the Budget and Finance Committee as well. Very well done. Thank you.
Director Hammond? No comment. Okay, I just have one comment, and this is another assignment for the general manager. But would you check with our insurance company to see if we need additional liability if we were to host this, the U.S. Open? Christine?
Once again, I'm sorry. If I could, I meant to give a thanks and a note of appreciation to our operations team and to Casey in particular, Casey Husta and her team for putting together an outstanding newcomers event. Occurred earlier this week. It's been a while since we had one. It seemed to be really, really well attended. I know I enjoyed meeting so many of our residents at that event. So just a note of thanks.
Okay. Thank you. I do have one other comment before we go to the audience, and that is next Wednesday at 9 o'clock at the Palm Ridge Summit Hall. We're going to have a mid-year review. It's basically a state of the association given by the general manager and his staff. I encourage everyone that can to attend. It will be YouTubed also. So if you don't have a chance to be there in person, you can watch it online at your convenience. Okay? Thank you. Tracy?
Tracy Anderson, 132045, president of just Lawn Bowling now. I just wanted to let you know that Russ and his crew built 11 new benches, and they are at the lawn bowling facility currently. So thanks to Russ and his crew, one happy president here. Also, I want to thank Carl for, we've had several discussions about these benches, and so he really made it work out, and I want to thank Russ as well, and also I want to thank Casey as well, because she has worked with me about getting these tournaments back here in Sun City West. So there's probably people I'm going to miss, but those are the three main people I'd like to thank, as well as all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We seem to have a stranger in the crowd.
Tracy, you had plenty of time to write your. Tom Jones, 110390. President Hurley?
Yes, sir.
If you would be so kind as to have somebody, maintenance, whatever, check into the safety of the chairs at that railing over there. I would look into it, because a chair rolled off. I think it only needs some type of a barrier for the rollers, but I think that is a very important safety issue that I know it has been addressed before, and that's why there's ramps and everything.
Okay.
Thank
We have
you.
another assignment for the general manager.
Oh, just pass the buck. The second is I went to go to breakfast at Memo's this morning, and they're closed. The rumor is that they're maybe permanently closed, and I was wondering, where do we go?
We'll have the
from
general manager make a statement about that.
Thank you. We did meet with the owner of the facility a week or so ago. I believe since the new year, the facility has been dark. She is struggling finding operational staff to support her over there. It's a real trying issue for her, and she has recently experienced a little bit of a health issue. So there's a medical condition going on there, and so I think still dark for another week, and then once she gets out of what she's dealing with, we'll kind of have more information toward the end of the month. Her contract is up for Mimos after a long run in August of 2024. We do have proposals out on the street for any interested concessionaire that is interested in competing for that opportunity to be there. And so that deadline to submit is February 1st. And so as we get closer to the end of January and see who's interested in that scenario, we will provide you an updated report as far as the future of the cafe.
Thank you. ARC is close, and we go up there and have breakfast during the week. So that's a concern of our members.
Can you cook?
I can. I can use the microwave. And bringing up ARC.
Hold that thought, Tom. But more importantly, do you have a food handler's card?
And that is something we do at our car show, February 10th. We have food vendors, and we do have food handlers permits. And so February 10th, it's a Saturday. Thank you, Lawn Bowling, for not having your tournament then. We'll have our annual ARC car show, February 10th, as a Saturday, and we will take up all the parking lot of probably over 400 classic cars. And at that event, there will be a raffle of a raffle car. If you haven't seen it, it's out in front of ARC. Buy your tickets. $20 each or $6 for $100. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coke Schaefer, president of the Pickleball Club. Getting back to budget items, I just want to reiterate what I've said in the past. Pickleball does not think it is advantageous for us to move to Coons for several reasons. The wall makes it very, very hot in there. If you take the wall down to the ground level, there's too much noise because of the proximity of the housing around there. And also, if you put 12 pickleball courts there, you're going to have 50 parking places, I would assume. I don't think there's adequate parking for that many pickleball courts there. So please take that in mind. There are other places we could probably expand our pickleball courts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Okay, we are going to adjourn this meeting at 11 o'clock.